Thank you for being here for the first ever Final Four talks as the executive director of the NABC. Uh, Obviously, you represent the largest professional association with 5,000 plus coaches. You're talking of guardians of the game and instilling these foundational values in people, which I think is tremendous. But from your life, right, who were those early coaches or the ones that set foundational values for you?
Yeah, well, Nilay, first of all, let me thank you and the NCAA for having me on. I think this is a terrific idea, and I'm really looking forward to participating in this program. When I look back at who my foundational coaches were, I have to start with my parents.
Sure.
Right? So they were my first coaches. And I think they're everyone's first coaches, even though you don't necessarily look at your parents as coaches. But I would have to say that they were the first ones there who instilled sort of our family values. They were the ones who got us, my sister and I, started on the path to where we ended up doing some really cool things.
So what was it like, south side of Chicago? I know your dad worked a lot as well. So what was that like for you growing up, having that presence of him and your mom?
My mom was a stay-at-home mom,
Right.
and my dad worked for the city of Chicago.
Right.
So he was what was called a stationary fireman,
Yeah.
but it was a typical blue-collar job at the water department. He was disabled. He had MS, and from my earliest memories of my dad, he always walked with a limp, and it got progressively worse over
Sure.
the years. But having said that, it did not stop him from being the dad that I wanted to model my parenting after. He got up and went to work every day, never complained, was at all of our events. He would come home, and he worked a swing shift. So he worked 6 days on days, 6 days on afternoons, and 6 days on nights. And on the days where he worked and he got home at a regular time, we'd be outside playing.
Yeah.
Or if he worked nights, he would stay up till we went to school. So, I mean, he was always around.
So how did your mom complement sort of his absence as well during those times?
She sort of made sure we kind of grew up with some discipline, some rules, and stuck to it. The house was filled with unconditional love, a real striving for excellence, but not in a pressured sort of tiger mom way.
Yeah.
My mom was the type of mom who you would come in and do your homework, and she would say, did you do your best? And she would never get on you for not getting an A. She would only get on you for not getting an A when you were capable of getting an A.
Yeah.
She would back you into excellence.
Yeah.
Without the pressure. And so another thing that I learned from my mom and my dad was how to be philanthropic when you don't have a lot of resources, because they were philanthropic with their time, not only with us, but with kids in the neighborhood. And when she saw that I got through with my work,
Right.
she said, you should be helping other kids with their work. And so that's where my sort of philanthropic character comes from.
You mentioned your mom being the disciplinarian. Did she treat you and your sister the same, differently?
She did not. And that is not a negative thing. And I'll tell you why. I was born in 1962. My sister was born in 1964. So we came up during what was still sort of a civil rights, highly aware civil rights time, where young black men had to be careful when they were out in the world by themselves.
You mentioned a line to me earlier that just bothered me at the very core. And you said your mom raised your sister to be that independent, fierce, successful woman, and she raised you not to get lynched.
Right. She raised me not to get lynched. And she used to say that. She's like, you can't go out here and act a fool, because young black men will get killed doing that. They raised me to survive that world as a black man, and they raised her to be an independent, strong black woman.
At the same time, you became a father for the first time as well, right? So one more big milestone now you're not just someone's son or husband. Now you're responsible for another human being.
Yeah.
Scary.
Not only was it scary, you know, I had heard my mom say, they don't teach you how to do this.
Yeah.
Well, they don't. And I was thinking, man, here it is, early 90s. I got to raise this boy to be a man. And the situation wasn't much different than it was when I was younger.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of to show him some of the things that my parents had to show me to sort of keep him out of harm's way.
I remember the only time in my life I've spontaneously cried is when my son was born, right? Mm-hmm. And it's that overwhelming emotion, and you know that you can't fail. Like, you want to do everything you want to do at the time to take care of them, to protect them, often at your own expense. And something your sister told your now wife, Kelly, is that if I ever ask you how things are going, don't tell me everything is fine.
Yeah.
And you're the guy who always said that during those years.
When my first marriage was sort of ending,
Yeah.
I didn't tell anybody because I always hoped that it would work out. I was acting like everything was fine. And my sister, when she found out that things weren't going fine, she was madder at me than she was at anybody else. Yeah. Particularly men keep their issues inside. We are not natural partakers in the mental health aspect of our lives until we absolutely have to. And that is something in our socialization that I see changing nowadays because people are more aware and there's more information out there. But growing up, my dad sort of kept the issues inside. I have done the same thing. My male friends who have gone through divorces and tough things in life have done the same thing. But you can't be afraid to reach out for help. And it's not just help, physical help, you need mental help.
You had friends that were pouring into you, and you had your group of people that were sort of helping you get through that as you were making a really big transition.
Yep.
And you went from banking to basketball again.
Right. My dearest friends all thought I was having a nervous breakdown because here I am, and like I said, I was in an industry making a lot of money for a young guy. But the whole time that I was in the banking industry, I wasn't all in because it's really a zero-sum game, right? If you're winning, somebody's losing. And that just wasn't my makeup. And deep down, I still was going back to that coaching. My former college assistant coach, Bill Carmody, who was the head coach at Princeton, got the head coaching job at Northwestern in Chicago. And by then I was working in Chicago. And he called me up out of the blue. Well, he was calling me up to offer me an assistant coaching job.
Wow. At
a Division I college. And I was stunned. By now, my first marriage is, I'm going through a divorce now. But I have 2 kids. And I'm trying to figure out if I can take this job, because in my mind now, I'm going from making what I'm making to making 1/10 of what I'm making as an assistant coach. In my mind, I'm trying to figure out if I can do it. And I'm like, yeah, I can do this, but I want to talk to some people. So I talked to the 2 people who I would go to for advice, my mom and my sister.
Yeah.
And so they both barrels, they handed to me like, what is there to think about? You should be doing what you like doing. And if Dad was alive and he told you to do it, you'd have done it by now. You won't want to listen to us because we're women, and that's my sister. That was my sister. She was just going all in. But she really hit me with you should do it because you love doing it.
Yeah.
It was never about the money for me, because after you sort of buy a couple of the things you want, you realize this is just stuff.
It's
that, and so I was more worried about my kids, who were 8 and 4 at the time. I get them in a room and I say, well, guys, I think Dad's going to get another job. And I said to them, Dad's going to be a coach. and I was waiting to hear their response. Because if they, and I'm worried about the wrong things. I'm worried about the house, big house you have, the nice car, the nice vacations. They're going to miss all of this. That was what was going through my mind. Stuff, right? 8 and 4. 8 and 4, and I'm worried about stuff. Well, they put me in my place because and so I say that, and my 8-year-old says, and who's a boy, says, calmly, I mean, he paused and he said, does this mean that your office is a gym? And I said,
how awesome is that?
I mean,
how awesome is that?
It was so neat because it also made me feel like a chump because there's just kids. They don't care. They just want you to be around. And I said, well, my office won't be in the gym. It won't be a gym, but it'll be next to the gym. And he said, cool. And my daughter, right after he was done, she said, do they have a pool there? And I said, yes, they do. And they were like, oh, sounds good. That's when I made the transition.
And you, of course, successfully transitioned, but you had two very different coaching experiences, from Brown and Ivy League to Oregon State and basketball. What were those experiences like?
They were both great experiences, and but just different institutions.
Sure.
And both sets of players want to be in the NBA if they could. But for both places, what I learned is I needed to manage they were just like my 8 and 4-year-old. They were just kids who were trying to get through this adventure, and hopefully, and I'm hoping they come out on the other side as better people. And what I tried not to do was try and recruit somebody who should have been at one school to my school.
Yeah.
I tried to be honest that way because it's hard enough recruiting kids who want to be getting kids who want to be in the situation you have, because there's other people who have similar situations. When it comes down to it, they're kids, they're individuals.
Yeah, and that last piece is critical, because I feel like the moment you said Brown, in my mind, I'm slotting them in that box, right? Here's the guy or gal in general. That's what they're going to do or not do.
Right.
And if you're here for basketball, and we're starting to compartmentalize them.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that I learned in coaching. A lot of the stuff that I brought to coaching, I brought from parenting.
Yeah.
One of the things that I learned from my players and learned from the coaching experience is to not compartmentalize my players.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to do.
It is.
But what you realize when you get them on your campus and you get them in your lives, each one of them is an individual, and they have to be coached individually. And while we're on the topic, another thing that I learned was this mental health aspect of how important mental health is in the lives of the kids you bring into your program.
Yeah.
And that, along with an empathetic view of the situations they're coming from at the same time, those kind of go hand in hand.
When you were coaching, though, one or two people you knew were slightly famous. What was that pressure like? Because I'm sure every action of yours was under a scanner in some ways.
It was, it is, and it will be from now on. That's the interesting thing about, when you have family members who are famous, and I only know this now. I didn't have this growing up. We weren't a political family.
Right.
When my sister met Barack, he was talking about being in politics.
Right.
But nobody could have ever thought he was going to be president of the United States.
Sure.
No way, right? And nobody would have ever thought my sister would have been the first lady. And I was already coaching. So that's public enough. When you walk into a building and people immediately know your politics, that is another level. It didn't phase the work, because if you're being authentic, people know who you are anyway. What I didn't want it to do is to have an adverse effect on the team or the players.
Sure.
So I always went out of my way to sort of make sure that they were in a safe space.
Yeah. All credit to you. You've been successful as a coach and done a lot of great things. But I'm sure you'll be the first to admit this doesn't happen without a really supportive partner behind the
Oh,
scenes.
absolutely. You can't have a job as a coach by yourself.
Yeah.
My wife, Kelly, was just as much involved in the recruiting and in the family feel that our team had.
Yeah.
You cannot do a team, let alone a regular life, if you don't have a supportive partner and understands team, understands sacrifice, compromise, discipline. So we make a good partnership.
You're now in a leadership role with the NABC. One of the big pieces you've done is add another core value.
Yes.
Talk to me more about that.
Yeah, so the NABC has always had 4 core values: advocacy, education, service, and leadership. We have 4 core values, and we're in a sport with 5 players. It would be kind of cool to have a 5th core value, and it was easy to come up with a 5th one based on what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
And our board unanimously approved us adding the 5th core value of inclusion, which is so timely.
Absolutely.
And it runs the gamut from equity to socioeconomic, racial. Just there's so many ways that our coaches can really push that core value, and we can push it as an association.
So now you're influencing the influencers, right? The coaches itself.
Yeah.
And you've come in at a time when, especially post George Floyd last year, you've seen this as well with the Derek Chauvin trial happening right now too. There is a whole different level of conversation around race reconciliation, and you have a committee on that.
Yeah.
And you're talking a lot more in your core values about that.
Right.
So where does the NABC go from here?
You know, the NABC is it's been a wonderful organization, and I've had the pleasure to be a part of it as a coach. Once I got hired, I inherited. It was right after the George Floyd incident. As a result of the George Floyd incident, the NABC board and the executive director came up with a committee on racial reconciliation.
Yeah.
And that committee I inherited, and they had started kind of these processes, and they were absolutely terrific. Standardized tests. There was the McClendon Leadership Initiative, which was started by a few of the coaches. And what these coaches came up with was a great idea on how to get more people in the pipeline. So what our coaches have done is they're sponsoring positions in athletic departments for young African Americans to sort of be exposed to the industry and hopefully have a chance to be hired by some of these places and sort of start filling the pipeline. We're lobbying politicians on getting African American studies be a required curriculum in both high schools and colleges. And then we did a huge voter registration and education initiative that was national this year. That was done by a group of assistant coaches. So we are trying to do as much as we can to combat these different issues of racial injustice. My job is to sort of help lead that, but to also be out in front for the coaches and letting our coaches be able to spend more time developing our student athletes.
Yeah, yeah. You know, as a former coach yourself, to current and potential coaches, is there anything you look back on your coaching career and say, I wish this were different?
So, you know, we have different levels. So we have the Division I guys that everybody sees, but you know, we have a lot of Division II, Division III coaches who are real teachers.
Yeah.
And there is part of our game where the coaching has turned into a profession, where we've lost the teaching part, and the goal is winning as opposed to developing.
At all cost.
Yeah. And I hearken back to when coaches were teaching, because that's what made me want to get into it, because I had some good coaches and some good teachers and who helped me get to where I am today. And just, it feels like we could help a lot more people that way. That's part of my job too, is to remind people that we've got thousands of coaches who are out there coaching kids who are graduating and going on to be professionals in something other than their sport.
If you think legacy, right, how would you want people to look at your impact or remember you and think of you?
I want people to feel like we've added value to the organization and to coaches, and that really that people look at coaches in a positive light again. You know, coaches have taken a little bit of a negative hit here in the recent past, and I as I mentioned earlier, I think coaches are a big part of all of our lives, because you don't necessarily have to be on a team to get coached. But I'm just hoping that this organization, we put it on a path where it can evolve with the times and not get stuck in one place.
And from your life journey, if there's one thing you want people to take away, what would that one thing be?
Everyone should absolutely try doing something they love for a living. So when they decide not to do it and do something for money, they'll know what they're missing.
I want to say it is refreshing to be in front of a live person again.
Right.
Even as we're socially distanced. But there is hope. And I want to thank you and, of course, the NCAA and everyone else that's helped put this on as well. Greg, thank you very much.
Thanks, Nile.